Oh, Becky, thanks for meeting with me. So, you're a clinical psychologist, and the
Yes.
reason I was so keen to get you talking with me for the channel is I think what you do is really unusual. Um, so, let's start with what you're doing at the moment.
Okay. I'm curious now as to the unusual bit. So I run a autism and ADHD assessment service for girls and women. Um, and so yeah, I lead that. I am doing some of the assessments myself still, but primarily I lead a team of clinicians, of speech and language
Mhm.
therapists, clinical psychologists, specialist nurses, occupational therapists who do assessments, autism and ADHD assessments for girls and women. But I've not always done this. I've been doing this for about 3 years now.
Uh-huh.
And I've been qualified 20 years. So yeah, it's been a pivot, but yeah.
Yes. And if we stick with that pivot, because I can feel my brain wanting to go off in all the different directions, but sticking with it,
Yeah,
um, why why did you want to get into these
yeah.
assessments, and
How
particularly
it
with
came
women and
about?
girls?
Yeah. Um, Yeah, it came about. It's very much fueled by my personal experiences, and I think that um, thinking about a career in psychology, and specifically well, not necessarily for me, it's clinical psychology, but I think that we have the possibilities there to develop something based on your own personal kind of what you really want to do, what matters to you. So for me, my daughter is autistic, which she went through the assessment process. So at that point, I had not developed this service, had no plans to at all. I was doing some other work, which may or may not get into, but supporting her through an autism assessment, and it was rubbish. Basically, it was really poor. And I'm a clinical psychologist, been working with children and families for the whole of my career, and had lots of kind of people who could get in contact with. You think that I should probably be able to find a service that was, that suited us and that would be good. And I would know what that would be. But actually, I guess I was very trusting, and did have some recommendations. But yeah, the assessment process was terrible. Really, really not good. I won't go into detail, but I mean, she was diagnosed, so we kind of got what we needed, but it was not a nice experience. And she recognises that in herself now. She's like, it wasn't good, was it? I'm like, no, it wasn't. Um, so after that, I was like, oh my God. And well, it wasn't just after that, the years before it, I was frustrated, I guess, as a parent, in school, and the kind of lack of understanding of autism
Mhm.
and ADHD in girls. They were very much expecting a very stereotypical um, picture of a young boy who, obviously that's how it's been for many, many years, but, and it's very different in girls. So that was so frustrating that they weren't sort of listening to me really. So I'd had that for years anyway. Then went through the process, thought, oh, we need to do this better. Like this is, there and is so many incredible girls, and then extended into women who really struggling without this awareness because of the kind of mismatch, I guess, in terms of how their brains and bodies are so brilliant and work in flow, and how that isn't matched with their environment. And so then they're kind of stuck because they can't kind of just be who they are. Um, so I just thought, well, I could do something here. And I've been working out of the NHS and working in my own businesses for about 10 years. So thought I would. The plan was to develop this in addition to, I was working in the family courts as well. So as an expert witness, family law psychology. So I thought, well, it's also good to not necessarily just have one stream of income. So I thought I'd develop this alongside. I mean, I love doing assessments. So yeah, I was doing the assessments with 2 colleagues, an education psychologist and a speech and language therapist, and I set up Autistic Girls to assess girls, to do a couple a month or what have you. And it's just absolutely grown from there. And we now, women got in touch and said, "Oh, I've seen Autistic Girls. Do you assess women?" I'm like, "No, but we could do." And so yeah, and it's kind of gone from there.
And I love this. I love this in your social media that you. And I think innovation can grow so well out of. We could do this better. There's an unmet need,
Mm,
and
mm,
I love that you had that confidence and that passion to just grab it and do it. For
yeah.
people that don't know, what does an autism and ADHD assessment involve?
Yeah, so with us, it involves quite a lot. And so
So
we
this is
are
what a gold
process.
standard assessment involves.
Well,
Let's be
this is
clear.
our standard. I think that I mean there are guidelines that say what a good assessment would look like. And we follow that, but we also do additional things. I guess it's really important for me that an autism and ADHD assessment is truly meaningful at the time, during the assessment, but then also, going forward. It's not just a tick box. I mean, I think there's possibly a place for a service where it is basically a kind of tick box, I think. Um, but that's definitely not ours, not what not what we do, and it's not kind of what I think is really, really helpful. So assessment with us, it starts off with a screening assessment. So, people are wondering, might I be autistic or ADHD? And there's lots out there in terms of this might mean that you are. And similarly, that's for adults and for parents thinking, and for children, for girls, us. Obviously, it's the same for boys as well. But wondering. In fact, it's really interesting because lots of girls go to their parents and say, "I think I'm autistic." This is what we'll
Mm-hmm,
get
mm-hmm.
families through, and it's the teenage girl who's wondered about it. So yeah, they might be wondering, but we have a screening assessment for a few reasons, really. One is because we absolutely understand the experience of autistic and ADHD girls and how that might be for them, but we're also very, very rigorous around the diagnostic criteria in terms of giving a diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
Because people talk about discovery, and identifying as autistic and ADHD, which is absolutely valid. Anyone can do that. And then there's a diagnosis. And if it's a diagnosis, that must reach the diagnostic criteria.
Yeah.
So we do the diagnostic assessment. So in that screening call, we're sort of checking, are there enough indicators that are aligned with the diagnostic criteria that would warrant a full assessment?
Mm-hmm.
So we're sort of checking that, but we're also checking the timing of an assessment for women in particular. Is this definitely the right time? Because an assessment with us is very, very in depth and really, it can be an extremely emotional process. And so we're sort of checking around supports and is this the right time and things like that. And they also get to meet us and see whether they think that we're the right sort of place for them. But then, and if that kind of goes through and they book in, the assessment is, there is some written forms. We have a written a form that people fill in, parents, girls and women. And the reason why we do that is to take the pressure off the kind of a set appointment, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
So the aim of the assessment really was 2 things. One is to gather evidence, as it were, to see along those diagnostic criteria whether someone reaches a diagnostic threshold. And the other thing is to take them through a meaningful process where the women are making sense of themselves, the girls are making sense of themselves, the parents are making sense of their daughter, like really kind of working things out slowly through our support. So we kind of do both, really. But in terms of, there's a lot of pressure, I think, on that appointment, or for us, it's multiple appointments, but still, there's a lot of pressure to speak and say how you're experiencing life, how you're experiencing your daughter. So we have a written form to sort of take the pressure off for that, and we have some questionnaires that just help. I think the thing about, because obviously psychologists, we use questionnaires quite a bit, and I mean, the actual outcome of them, yeah, it's it's a piece of information, but I think it really helps to kind of sort of, what's the word? Or not fine tune, but kind of focus the mind into what the assessment's going to look like. So I think our form really shows exactly what we're going to be asking about in more detail, in the appointment. So I think that it helps to prepare, I think, the written stuff.
Yeah, I can see
And
that.
then appointments, obviously it differs for girls and women, and whether they have autism and ADHD, but basically we really pride ourselves on being collaborative and really joining. So if you think about the women, it's absolutely not a kind of question and answer, which a number of them have had other assessments, unfortunately. They've been very quick. You're like, some of them 20 minutes, and they're told, no, you're not autistic. But anyway, we don't have that question and answer. It's very much an exploration of how they experience the world, similarly with parents and with the girls. And then there's as a team, so they quite, people will see more than one person from a different professional background. So the clinical psychologist, speech and language therapist, occupational therapist, they look at different things. And then we sort of have a conversation together, everyone that's kind of got to know this person, and decide whether it meets threshold, but also what do they need going forward. Because with the girls, we don't just do a diagnostic assessment, we also do an education assessment. It's not required for diagnosis, but we have an education psychologist who meets with the girls, no matter what age they are. If they're primary school, they also have an observation, but they also meet with them. And then after the assessment's complete, the education psychologist chairs a meeting with the parents and the school to talk about the assessment and what they need in school going forward. So yeah, it's not required, but because of my experiences, my personal experiences, I was like, I don't want an assessment just to be done and then dusted. It's like, and as a parent going into schools talking yourself, you don't have as much power as if you've got an education psychologist with you saying, this is what needs to happen. So it's given them that step in that right direction after the assessment. So
yes,
yeah. That was a long answer, but in a way I'm like, there's so much more we do, but that's a kind of...
No, that's brilliant. I'm going to jump you backwards in time. Okay. Where did your interest in psychology first come from?
It's interesting, isn't it, looking back, and now it's obviously there's a long period of time, and so I think, first of all, so my dad was a criminal barrister, and so I was surrounded by quite often, obviously it's my dad, and then there'd be lawyers. Quite often they were quite social, so I'd sort of hear story. I mean, they wouldn't talk in detail, obviously, but I just was aware of things that went on in the kind of criminal law field. And my brain just always wanted to understand why. Like I never, like I remember my dad being involved in a very high profile murder case. I didn't know the ins and outs, but I did know a little bit. So it was in the media anyway. But and instead of being like horrified, I was always like, why did they do that? How did that come? Like, even as a student at that point, young teenage girl. So that was in my environment. And then I wondered about law. So in a way, I kind of ruled stuff out as well. So I wondered about law just because, I mean, both my sisters went into law. My dad was like, but actually, so I went on a weekend, like law, what they call it? It was up at Northumbria, which is actually where I ended up going to university. But it was like you went for the weekend, and it was the law school and a group of sixth form kids, and they sort of, you obviously learned about the law degree, and we went to the law courts, but also about the degree and all that kind of stuff. And I very quickly was like, no, it's too boring for me. I'm ADHD. I didn't know that at the time, but I was like, no. And my oldest sister was studying law, had studied law at that point, and she said a lot. She told me about case law and how you learn a lot of stuff. So, you have to learn all the case law. I was like, no. So I ruled that out, and then I always knew, and I think this is really interesting and important to think of when you're at that point, sort of the age of sort of 15, 16 up to kind of 18, when you're making those decisions about what you want to do. I think I'd developed an understanding of what I was interested in. That wasn't the word psychology at that point, because I actually didn't know that existed. This is in the early 1990s. And I'm from a rural town in Cumbria, like, I don't know. And I didn't actually grow up without television. So I didn't even know the word psychology. And thankfully, everyone does now. But I knew that I was interested in people.
Yeah.
And I used to get the National Geographic. I was interested in culture. I wondered about, oh my God, the word's gone. Anthropology. That's what I was going to study, actually. And then my dad said, that'd be fine, but you'll probably get a job in a museum. That's probably what the resulting thing. And I was like, oh, I don't want that. So anyway, I knew I was interested in people, and I saw in the careers room, psychology is the study of behaviour. I was like, I'll do psychology then. So it's kind of luck. No one said to me. But I did geography, and I loved human geography at A level. So it kind of made sense. Thankfully, I found this word, psychology. Thought, well, I'll do that. Applied, had no idea how I'd find it because I didn't really know what it was. And had another plan of potentially doing geography if I didn't like psychology. But thankfully, someone recommended to go for the psychology first, see how that went, because I could probably switch to geography. But going in geography, probably couldn't switch to psychology because it's very popular. And started it up in Newcastle at university. And oh my God, I loved it. I mean, wow, honestly, absolutely fell in love with psychology. I literally was like, and at school, like I really underperformed. We didn't have psychology at A level or GCSE, absolutely not in my school, and not many schools did. Some schools did sociology. I remember we didn't, but so I didn't know how it would go, but yeah, I absolutely loved it. It was just absolutely right for me. So I feel kind of lucky in a way. And then just flew, like my degree, I absolutely flew, and found it really, I worked hard, but I found it easy because I was so interested in it. And got a first class degree, which I did work hard for, but again, because I loved it. And so, yeah. And kind of, I don't know whether you want to talk about clinical psychology. Yeah, that's kind of how I got into it.
Yeah. So what did you do? What did you do after your degree? And at what point did you decide that clinical was the way forwards for you?
Well, it was actually during my degree. I always had a question whether I might go into sports psychology, which obviously that's your area. But as a sports psychologist, I wasn't thinking about, like purely in sports psychology. That's what I did my thesis on, my undergrad thesis. I absolutely loved my sports psychology module. I had a really good relationship with Sandy Wilson, who ended up being the professor up there and who was the sports psychologist for Newcastle at the time. And at the time, she said to me, it's so interesting. I love looking back at like those sliding door moments. She said to me, I don't think you should go into sports psychology. There aren't many jobs that, at that point, it was true. There weren't many. Honestly, she was one of a very small number of sports psychologists in the country. It's blown up since then. You know, it's grown so much, hasn't it? So, but at the
But they do
time,
still struggle. There are still not a lot of jobs
right,
for the number of
right,
people that are training.
yeah, wow,
Yeah, it can be tricky.
yeah.
Yeah, a lot of
So
interest.
she
Um,
said, don't go down that route. Go down the clinical psychology route. And I was like, oh right, okay. So that kind of, she sort of planted the seed. And um, this is a really interesting belief that I'd held, and I don't actually think it was. It's half correct and half not correct. I somehow had developed this belief that to be a clinical psychologist and get on the doctorate and all the rest of it in the long run, you had to be really clever. I just had that belief. It's really interesting.
but you with your
Uh,
first class degree, not
no,
really
this is
clever.
before. No, but this is while. So this was beginning of my degree. And then in the second year, I remember getting the first set of results that were going towards it. And like, honestly, at school, I got, low grades generally. So, but they were pretty much all first class. I was like, oh, how has this happened? Maybe I can do clinical psychology. Now, I don't think that's right. I don't think that's accurate. I don't think you have to be super, super clever, actually. I really don't. I think there's lots of things that aren't there that build up towards you applying to get onto the doctorate. And yeah, I mean, obviously there's a certain level of kind of grades and things, I guess, that take you there. But anyway, so I was like, oh right, okay, maybe. So and got lots of experience while I was at university of I'm quite focused, when I'm like, oh, I really want to do that, then I do that and
Yeah.
work out how am I going to do this. And so I wrote, because back then, we hadn't really even started, we just started using computers. That's so old. But yeah, I wrote to all of the departments and asked for experience at literally all of them in Newcastle and surrounding areas. And a couple of them got back to me. And in those days, you could just go and do, experience. I remember going up to one of the hospitals and did some neuropsychological assessments with people, and did some work experience in schools with an educational psychologist. So kind of got a bit of experience. And then, yeah, I knew I wanted to do clinical psychology. So I applied once I finished my degree. I literally applied for every assistant psychology post. I had interviews from Edinburgh to Chichester to London to Bath. Like, I would have gone anywhere. And I was thinking I wanted to share this with you. When I was in my final year of my degree, somebody who knew, I think somebody who knew somebody that I knew, you know how it is, who was I think maybe training or had just qualified as clinical psychologist. I can't remember, but new into the profession. She, I was asking her about it and any advice, and she said, if you really, basically, let me word this properly. You will become a clinical psychologist if that's if that's all that you want. If you want it more than anything, it will happen. But if there's kind of, I quite, I'd really like to, but if there's, then you possibly won't. Like, you've got to be so single-minded at that point. Anyway, that was her advice, and I
Mhm.
actually think she was right. So anyone can do it if they're absolutely determined that's what they're going to do. So I would just applied anywhere and everywhere, and I kept on getting interviews because talk the talk. I can write the right or whatever. I can make it sound really like, it's fresh out of university. It's so hard to get that first job. They'd give me an interview because they were kind of curious, I guess, about me, but I wasn't getting jobs because I had very little experience. But then it happens. And I do think that is the thing about persistence, isn't it? And, eventually, and thankfully, I got a job here, well, I say here, in Manchester. I'm from the northwest. I said I'm from Cumbria, so it was great that it was up here. And it was a department who were looking for very sort of fresh. There was a group of 4 of us assistants that started at the same time, and we were all kind of very, very new in that. But that was working with older adults. I didn't set out going, I want to work with older adults. I was like, I work with anyone. I just want
Yeah.
to get to know clinical psychologists in the field, and I'll work with any, and I loved it. But then I loved every client group I worked with.
Yeah. I can
I
imagine
really
that.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your enthusiasm.
Yeah, I did.
I'm sort of segueing a little bit. What would and you've sort of maybe covered some of this already, but what would some of your top tips be for students that are interested in psychology jobs, careers?
Yeah, I think I I think there's something really important about it's going to sound really cheesy, and I don't actually think that this was the case for me. So I think that, but I think it's really important to really like know yourself and know what you're interested in. I mean, obviously, I knew I was interested in people and behaviour, but just have that really strong grounding within yourself of this is what I'm kind of, this was what really interests me, because I do feel lucky that I see my work as like, I just love it. I've always loved my job. There have been times where where certain aspects of my job, especially in the NHS, I've not liked as much. But I have always loved my job. Like after a holiday, I'm giddy to get back to work. Like, how lucky is that? I don't think I could actually work in something where I'm not super interested in. In fact, I had one job where I wasn't in it for very long, and I got really low because it just wasn't lighting me up. So it's very important for me, and for some people in particular, even are very interest driven. So, but I think everyone, if you're really interested in something, that will take you down the route that's best for you. So yeah, I think it's about, there is something more about the sort of the core of who you are, the heart and the soul. If it really wants it, then that will pull you. If you're sort of thinking, oh, it sounds really good, that, I think that'd be great, but actually don't really feel it, like a bit of passion, because it's tough, the training, the getting into it. I'm a long time out of it. I don't actually know how it is getting into training. I can't imagine it's any easier, but I mean, maybe it is, I don't know. But my experience is that it's tough. It's really, really tough to get the assistance posts, to get onto the training. And so I feel like there has to be a passion, not just kind of like, oh yeah, that'd be a good job. It's like, no, I want it. So yeah, that's important, I think.
To know yourself, having that passion. Be good. I mean, I love your enthusiasm for what you're doing. It's been great to hear about your story. But where you're touching on sort of some of the challenges, obviously only share as much as you feel comfortable with. But yeah, what have been some of the difficulties? Because it can be a tough route. I'm really aware in these videos that we don't want to set people up to then be surprised when they hit some challenges and feel unprepared for that.
Yeah, I guess there will be lots. I'll just go wherever my brain. The first sort of stop in my challenges path was actually more contextual. So environments. This is about this is me thinking back to when I worked in the NHS, and so yeah, not so much about being a clinical psychologist actually, but the environment I worked in. So when I first qualified, we all had our own rooms, and we'd see. So I worked as a child clinical psychologist, and I'd had my own desk and my own room, and see people in there, and I'd thrived in that. And there was nothing about being precious about needing my own room. We all, it's just how it was, and it worked. I think we were all very, very, like, we worked so hard, and I think we all did a great job. And then, money and all the rest of it, change of government, the Tories came in, and it really did impact things financially across trusts. And then I worked in a massive open plan office, and I just remember that being so difficult. Just doesn't work for me at all. So yeah, that's more environmental. But I think it's important to think about things like that. And now I would definitely advise people to sort of really think about what kind of environment can they work in. And I wasn't aware to sort of say, I knew I struggled with it. And I did used to say, I did say I found it difficult, but we weren't allowed to work from home at that point. But now I think I'd be a lot more vocal about that. Like, you know, I'm just really not able to work in this environment. So that's tricky. I'm trying to think of other challenges just necessarily part of the work. So I worked for a while in a treatment foster care program. I don't know if you're ever aware or remember, there was a huge national kind of initiative around multi-dimensional treatment foster care. So kids who are living in foster care, but kind of some of them, the aim was to reunite them, develop their relationships with their birth families and reunite them, well, not reunite them, but develop those relationships. And some children actually moved back to live with their birth families anyway. So, but they were kids that were really, really struggling. And there was an on-call, we did on-call. So I struggled with that at times. I mean, I think it's, and I know that some clinical psychologists, their roles do have an on-call element. So, you know, and you'd be on call over the weekend, and, you know, I'd be very aware of what I didn't do, because I might be able to take a call at any time. But the calls would be emergency, like very, you know, like, a child has locked foster care in a room, and there's in a something, or like it's quite dangerous, you know, and you kind of got to work out. And not always like that. Sometimes it would be things had happened and the foster carer needed to support and just to talk it through, and that's okay, you know. But sometimes they were quite tricky. So in a way, like I did like the element. I preferred it when it was during the week, and like I liked going into work and something had happened and I can kind of think on my feet quickly in that environment. But on my own, on a phone, I would then be like, oh, you know, do I this, do I that? And I was relatively newly qualified. I think at that point it's probably about 3 years qualified. So that was tricky.
And quite an unusual way for us to be working, I would think.
Possibly, okay. I do know that since then, I know some psychology teams definitely on call around risk, and I think that's in CAMS anyway, in children adolescent mental health services. I think quite a lot of psychologists are on call for that. So that was definitely a challenge for me. And I'm trying to think. So I moved into private practice in 2015. And the challenges with this, it's the benefit is also the kind of challenge. So you get to work however you want to develop your working, you know, your business, really. You're very, very autonomous, and I absolutely love that. But I guess there isn't that guaranteed income. You know, you do have to hold that that kind of, you have to hold that, but I think not let it really, it does shape your decisions. It has to, but not let it really kind of block you from certain things. I mean, I love it. I actually really like all that, and kind of working out this decision making. I used to really like decision making, actually, the module at undergrad. We did a lot about decision making, but I think it's really interesting, that combination of your head and your heart and your soul and your gut and all that kind of like, what decision shall I make for my business? But I kind of like it, but it is challenging. It definitely has been in the past, working on my own. But now I'm working in a team, so it feels different. But
and again, I'm thinking it's not the way our training has. It's not something our training has prepared us for, is it?
No.
our NHS training. We're not having to think from a business perspective, are we? And similarly, I would share that sense of at its best, I find that really enriching and really exciting. And at its worst, I can feel a bit out of my depth.
Yeah.
And it
I
can
think
be
that's
harder
actually,
to find, like, what support do I need? Who can help me with this?
yeah. I think it's really good to for people who are wondering about a career in psychology, to be aware though that if they are aware in themselves that there is a kind of like an interest in sort of entrepreneur business, kind of creativity as well, creating something yourself. That was not really when I went through training. Very few people ran their own businesses. It really wasn't a thing at all. And whereas now I think it's good to know that you can, yes, of course, I think, I don't know how it would be to develop your own practice early in your career. I mean, I think it's really helpful to work with lots of people initially and develop and get to develop your skills. But in time, you have got the possibility. It's really quite common now for people to have their own businesses, and I do think there are some young people who are quite excited about having their own business, and so that can be clinical psychology. I think in the past it'd be, the two wouldn't have gone together, and well, it was, you were kind of shamed if you even thought about working privately when I was first qualified, whereas now a lot is probably 50-50, I imagine, or something. I have no idea what the numbers are, but
No, I don't know, but I've seen that same shift. And again, I think my perception of private psychology services would have been purely around therapy and less innovative, less creative than some of what we're seeing now. Becky, that's been fantastic. For time reasons, I'm going to pause us there. I feel like I could talk to you all day. Actually, I will just ask, is there anything that I haven't asked you about that you'd want to throw in?
I don't actually. One final thing that might be useful is that obviously I'm a huge advocate of clinical psychology and I love it. But I do say this to people, you see, who are wondering about a career in it. There are other roles that can, what's the word, sort of almost fulfill like that kind of, that interest in working even therapeutically with other people. Clinical psychology is not the be all and end all, and it takes a long time, and it's tricky. But there are other, like for example, at the moment in my team, I think, oh gosh, I could have done a speech and language therapy degree, and I would have loved that, or an occupational therapy, as an occupational therapist, you can work therapeutically with people. Clinical psychology is wonderful and grounding in so much. You are set up to do all sorts of different things. It's phenomenal. But there are other paths that are, probably you could get somewhere quicker, you could get a job quicker, for example. So just that sounds almost a bit anti-clinical psychology. It isn't. It's just saying, you could be interested in it, but just also check out other options. You might be interested in those first. You might do that and then, or you might just run with that. So
no, I've definitely, I like that you've said that. I don't think that's come up in any of the conversations so far, and I've definitely spoken to people who have, perhaps not been early 20s, mid 20s, kind of the sort of ages that you and I were when we were doing our training. People sort of further down the line sort of thinking, oh, could I, would I, should I do clinical training? And I've had that similar reflection sometimes of like, actually, is it worth, particularly if they haven't got a psychology degree and they've got to kind of start at that level, that, like you say, there's an emphasis, isn't there? If we think of ourselves as applied practitioners, there's a lot of overlap between the work that we do, the work that other professionals can do. So again, it's about being creative and flexible, isn't it? That sometimes there's different ways to do a similar enough version of the same role. So if people were finding, for example, if it was the neurodivergent assessments people were really interested in, that it's not just clinical psychology, it might be educational psychology, might be OT, might be speech and language, different ways into that part of it.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think that's a really nice piece to throw in. I will pause the recording there and just say thank you again for your time.